Loud. All right, thank you all for joining today. I'm really pleased and excited for this event. PRSA Detroit presents Making a Mark with Influencer Marketing. My name is Jeff Adkins. I'm co-chair of the programming committee here for PRSA Detroit. With influencer marketing becoming more prevalent every day, it can be a valuable part of a communication strategy. To be successful, practitioners must know how to leverage it effectively. Today's virtual panel will discuss the best practices of influencer marketing, some of the key do's and don'ts, and how influencer marketing can be successfully integrated into communications campaigns. Before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a Q&A section. As we're having the discussion, please feel free to drop your questions in there. We'll walk through that in the last 15 minutes of the program. We'll get through as many as possible, hopefully all of them. As usual, we will keep the Zoom open a little while after the program. So if you want to stick around for some casual networking with the panelists and myself and anybody else who stays, please feel free to do so. Before we get into the introductions here, I'd like to read PRSA's antitrust statement. PRSA's policy is to comply fully and strictly with all federal and state antitrust laws. Meetings and programs held under the auspices of PRSA must be conducted in a manner that avoids the fact or appearance of conduct that may violate the antitrust laws. Participants are not to discuss industry-wide or individual company prices, current or projected, or matters relating to pricing such as costs, profits, contractual terms and conditions like discounts or credit terms, wages, salaries, market allocation, market shares or sales, or clients or customers, or other competitively sensitive information. Compliance with the antitrust laws is a requirement for PRSA membership, and responsibility for the compliance rests with each member. Participants in PRSA meetings and programs have an obligation to terminate any discussion, seek legal counsel, or if necessary, terminate any meeting if the discussion might be construed to raise any antitrust risks. All right, and with that, I'd like to go ahead and jump into the introductions here. So we're going to start with Jake. So Jake Hall is a business development manager for Fine Zylstra, also known as FZ, but is better known as the Manufacturing Millennial. His passion is to advocate manufacturing, automation, digital transformation, and skilled trades by helping revolutionize the way people and companies present through social media. With more than 30,000 followers and 10 million plus views on his content, he ignites conversations about the latest in manufacturing and automation to excite the current and future workforce on the impact this industry has. Welcome, Jake. Happy to have you.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Absolutely. Next, we've got Antonice Strickland. Antonice is an award-winning public relations and strategic communications professional with an immense passion for service, education, and diversity advocacy in corporate spaces. Named as one of HuffPost's top African-American PR millennials to watch, Antonice brings an array of skills and experiences to any project that comes her way. She has developed and managed national campaigns, organized internal processes for small and mid-level organizations, and has landed coverage in print and broadcast outlets such as Fox, ABC, MSNBC, and many more. Currently, Antonice is the Senior Director of Marketing and PR for the Boys and Girls Clubs of Southeast Michigan, where amid the pandemic, she continues to develop, manage, and organize strategic comms for the business's activities and expansion. Although a Michigan native, she began her career in Washington, D.C., working for nonprofit agencies like Becky's Fund, the National Black Public Relations Society of Washington, D.C., and the Black Women's Health Imperative, where she led internal and external comms and marketing efforts to government agencies such as the U.S. Consumer Product Safety Commission. Along with her professional experiences, Antonice has served on the executive board for the National Black Public Relations Society, Washington, D.C., and currently with the Detroit chapter, and the board of directors for Public Relations Society of America National Chapter, and currently with the Detroit chapter. Antonice earned her bachelor's in journalism from Michigan State University and a master's in PR and corporate communications from Georgetown. Happy to have you, Antonice.
I'm super happy to be here.
And last but not least, we've got Lindsay Wyskowski. Thinking big and acting bold is just one of Identity's core values. It's also how Lindsay Wyskowski approaches her work as Identity's brand strategy director. In this role, she develops strategic framework and provides essential insights for campaigns, activations, and initiatives across Identity's client portfolio, as well as the agency's internal team. Dreaming big has truly been core to who Lindsay is. She knew at age 10 she wanted to go to the Olympics. And while she wasn't fast enough swimmer to make that happen, she found a way to make her dream come true. She followed her heart from CMU to Colorado Springs, Colorado, working for the Olympic movement and USA Triathlon team for more than 8 years. During her time at USA Triathlon, she managed media and communication strategies, leading to greater exposure of the sport nationally. She has traveled the globe to cover events including the 2012 London Paralympic Games, 2016 Rio de Janeiro Olympic Games, 2018 Pyeongchang Winter Olympic Games, as well as various Triathlon World Cup and World Championship events, including the 2015 ITU Triathlon Grand Final Chicago, where she managed global media operations. While at USA Triathlon, Lindsay also earned a master's degree in PR and marketing from the University of Denver. Lindsay returned home to Michigan in late 2016. Unsurprisingly, she continues to foster a love for travel, triathlon, Olympic and Paralympic sports. Inspired by cultures around the world, Lindsay tries to visit one new place each year to expand her horizons and learn more about the world around her. When she's not traveling, she's sitting by a lake, sampling craft beer, watching documentaries or Star Wars, and reading whatever she can. Lindsay, happy to have you with us today.
So glad to be here.
All righty. I think we can jump right into this. Expert panel, really looking forward to all of your insights on this. So we'll just jump right into things here. So I think we're going to start off with Antonice for our first question. So Antonice, when a practitioner wants to utilize influencer marketing, where should they start? What does the process look like?
Yeah, definitely. So in my opinion, kind of the process with that, what you should start with is really understanding your goal and the big picture strategy. So, you know, influencers are amazing, but it only really benefits you and your purpose if you have a goal that you're trying to reach and you're able to, you know, articulate that to them as well so that you can find success. So that's where you would start, literally understanding that goal and the strategy, your why. After that, you want to know what you want your audience to do. So again, as you're working with these influencers, what kind of reaction are you, what is your expectation of the audience as they see these influencers? Do you want them, and that kind of falls under line of your strategy. Are you looking for increased sales? Are you just looking for more followers? Are you looking just for engagement? Really understanding that, because then which type of influencer you work with can really kind of like navigate that. And then also, what is the influencer going to do? So are you looking for just a standalone post? Are you looking for a story? Are you looking for an IG live? Are you looking for, you know, are you looking for a long-term campaign? Are they posting 3 to 5 posts over a 1 to 2 week period? Like what are the expectations of them as well? Because you really want to make sure that's clear. And then another piece of it is your budget. So, and that's kind of when I get to my next phase. And sorry, I should have said, oh, there's a top 5 things, but your budget is very critical as well. And then once you understand those pieces, really getting an idea of those list of potential influencers, from nano influencers, which is, you know, your typical from 100 to maybe 10,000. And I think the range may vary right now, but those are your small but mighty influencers. So it's kind of like, you know, is that going to kind of bring the most bang for your buck? Are you looking for a micro influencer, a macro, or even those mega influencers that are the celebrities? Like, are you going to send something to Kim Kardashian and now you get all these, followers and engagement? Is that within your strategy and your goals? So, and then outreach to them and have fun once you understand your contract and everything. So those would be the steps in my mind that we've done or that I've worked on in the past.
Absolutely. Anything to add there, Lindsay, Jake?
I mean, I think that aligns so much with what we do too. Like I think budget is a huge thing. I think understanding what the goals and objectives are. Like if you want your influencer that you're working with to mention certain things, like having like a document or some kind of resource that they can turn to like create their own content that keeps your brand or your company in mind. So critical. Like all of those elements are really important on the front end to even determining if influencer marketing is the right fit for what it is that you're doing.
Exactly. That's critical because it may not really be what you need.
Right.
Understand that strategy.
So I'd like to take our next question here over to Jake. So Jake, as an influencer, when being approached, what makes you want to work with a brand?
Yeah, great question. I think a lot of it for me personally has to do with what is the brand trying to advocate and what are they trying to push. With me, I'm super passionate about manufacturing, workforce development, skilled trades in my industry. And if a company is not really aligning or matching with those goals, it doesn't match my audience. because the one thing I value more than sponsorship is the people who actually enjoy and watch my content. Because if I begin to push products or brands that are completely unrelated to what I talk about, that decreases the value of my brand personally. So that's the first thing I have to look at. Does it match what I'm trying to project? I guess is the first thing. The other thing is understanding, do their goals or expectations match what I want to share? If they want me to go out and just do a product announcement and say, buy product A is best, product A is better than product B, that's not something that I like to drive on. Because for me, I'm about driving awareness, driving brand opportunity through my market. And if it's one of those things where it's just sell a product, that's not matching what my brand personally is about.
Definitely. Great insight there. Thanks, Jake. Lindsay, can you share some examples of the ways that you were able to find a relevant and fitting influencer for a brand or client?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great question, because at Identity, we work with we have 200 or so different partnership moments in the past year. So obviously we're spending a lot of time trying to find people that we can work with and make sure they're the right people. So I would say that there's a lot of really great tools out there that are like influencer, search engines or agencies or whatever. But I would say some of those are cost prohibitive. So sometimes it's a little bit easier to take matters into your own hands. One of the things that we like to do is just search on the platforms where we're trying to find people. So, if we're looking for people who are Instagram influencers, we're looking on that platform, we're searching the hashtags of, tags that are relevant to the brands and businesses that we work with. We might be looking at other brands who are kind of adjacent to ours. They're not necessarily competitors, but they're like partner brands. In some cases, we've worked with a CPG client where we're trying to get more people aware of the fact that their product is available in a certain retailer. And so we look at who has tagged that retailer as kind of an influencer partner or a shopper of that retail store. And then we're able to kind of reach out to those people and say, hey, we know you shop at Meijer or XYZ retailer, and we are interested in promoting a product that's there. Would you be interested in working with us? We also look at followers of other influencers that we do work with or that we kind of like. Influencer or the Instagram Explore page is great. And there's sometimes even like local outlets that publish lists of influencers. Like I think Our Detroit has done that. And there are other kind of more like lifestyle brands who are publishing lists of potential influencers in a certain market. So that's a great resource too. There's a lot of really great like free resources out there if you can get creative and crafty, where you don't have to spend like thousands of dollars a month just to have access to some database.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Lindsay. Any thoughts you want to add to that, Antonice, Jake? Any examples of,
No, I just agree with that 1,000, like really utilizing those free resources. Like I tag Explore page, like, hey, come find me. I want to influence. So you can literally find those people, without spending a ton of money. But if you do happen to work for a big major, agency or corporation or something, you have the budget. Sometimes utilizing those agencies that are already connected with those influencers can make it a little easier. So just depends on how much money you have to play around with, honestly.
It does take a little bit of time. So that's the other thing you have to consider. Like, do you have the time to commit the resources to searching for things like that? But in the end, like if you're on the track of actually wanting to have influencers as part of your program, like Antonice talked about, like all the things you can do, and then you have the time to dedicate to kind of like fostering those relationships, like that's huge.
Yeah, and you mentioned a really valuable thing too, Antonice, just a little while ago when you were talking about the different, you got the micro influencers, the nano influencers, all these different levels. And it really reminded me of our last program that we focused on TikTok in December. And Tega was talking about that. She was saying, just a person, an influencer might have like 10,000 followers, but their reach could be a lot higher. And especially, if it's a very niche audience.
Definitely. Like I've seen people with, less than 10,000 followers, but they're people, they trust them. Their followers trust them. So they're going to get more people that are going to go buy something because it's like, oh, we trust Lindsay. Like we know whatever she's posting, even though she has I don't know how many followers, I'm just gonna throw this out here. She has like 5,000 followers, but you know, that may give them more bang for their buck because they know at least 25,000 of or 2,500 of them are gonna go to their site. So
Yeah. I'm kind of curious too. Have you, with the influencers that you've approached, have you looked at like TikTok, or are you looking at like one channel primarily? I guess it kind of would depend on what the campaign is.
I think it depends on the campaign for sure, your audience, because in my opinion, and feel free, Jake and Lindsay to hop in, but yeah, it depends on what your goal is. That's why that first step is so critical, because you can say like, oh yeah, some people will just jump to like, oh, we got to be on TikTok. And it's like, well, okay, yeah, but why? Like, what is your big picture and who are we talking to? Like, if it's not a certain niche or age group, why are we spending so much time on TikTok? So I think, yeah, you got to understand your goal, your organization's goal, your campaign, everything before you run to a Jake and then it's not even aligned. He tells you no anyway. Like, you gotta have all that in order. So
that's a good segue into our next question here, which you kind of touched on there, Antonice. But what are some of the key considerations practitioners should keep in mind when negotiating with an influencer on a content plan or deliverables?
Yeah, and I know I keep saying this, but keeping solid with your goal at the end of the day, especially if you're paying them and this isn't like a pro bono thing, like, oh, just out of the kindness of their heart. Your goal is top of mind. That's what you're doing this for. But also ensuring that freedom of creativity, like making sure that even though, yes, I'm speaking so highly on this goal and strategy, you don't want to stunt how great this project or this partnership can be by, helicopter managing it, like really allowing that creativity to flow and them to have their own voice within it. I know I've worked with influencers and they're like, why did they write, like they want just like bullet points so they can draft the script potentially because they want it to come from their voice because it's their audience that's hearing it. So I think making sure that that's very clear as well. And then setting an agreement, signing that agreement and sticking to it. Because, I think that's so critical because sometimes, if you're just kind of on Instagram, like, hey, can you do this? And then there's nothing really set in stone. And it's kind of to protect both parties because the influencer may be like, you were supposed to pay me this. And I did X amount of things and now they're not getting what they're supposed to be paid. Or you pay somebody and they just decided to like post something and then they deleted it in like 3 minutes or something, just to say they did it.
Right.
I'm being dramatic with it. I know that's probably not what happens, but having those contracts, I feel like are huge considerations that we have to put into place when negotiating, being clear on that price, making sure it's in the agreement, the expectations are there, and signing it, making sure everybody understands. And, then again, going and having fun after that.
Yeah, and we use contracts and we provide like bulleted lists of message points and things like that. Part of our process for most of the influencers we work with is also like an approval process. So it's, we want people to come up with their own content and their own authentic voice, but we also want to make sure that the brand is well represented. So we make sure that we have some time baked in there, and that's stated in our contract agreements is like what the turnaround time is for approving content so that we know when we need to get that back to the influencer so they can actually post it. But I think that what you're saying is like it's just rings so true in terms of like making sure that all that information is communicated between everybody up front so that you're not sending an influencer a product or asking them to come to an event and then they're posting something that's wildly different than what you
exactly
post.
Yeah, I could see, you want them to be creative and give them creative freedom, but obviously you've got to stick to what the end goal is there.
A couple of comments, to add to that real quick. I think one of the biggest things as well when you're looking at influencer audiencing is understanding what platform. And I know Antonice and Lindsay kind of hit on this, but for me, like personally, I am in the manufacturing and automation space. That's where I live. I work, my audience is engineers, directors, VPs, and CEOs of manufacturing companies. That's my audience. So for me, being on a platform like Instagram or TikTok or Facebook is great because you get a lot of reach, you get a lot of numbers, but the impact of following is not as great as your target audience. So like for me personally, I chose when I wanted to go into more social media, I chose LinkedIn because I have access to all the professional profiles. I have access to the companies. I have access to the size of those companies, a lot of details out of that. So when companies look at where's my value coming from, it's not always about reach, or as Antonice was saying, a person with 10,000 followers might have a better impact of what your goal is than a person with 1 million followers. Because for me, I have 30,000+ followers on LinkedIn, but the great part about that is those are 30,000 engineers in manufacturing. I could share a lot of content and be probably very successful with it when it comes to manufacturing on like TikTok or Instagram Reels, and I could get hundreds of thousands of millions of views probably every week. But at the end of the day, integrating automation solutions is not what a Gen Z person on TikTok is going to make a decision on. So
Yeah.
one of the questions that came up with, if you don't mind me answering a question that came up in
Sure.
chat that was targeted to me was, this is from Megan. Jake, you said that promoting product A over product B isn't something you do. So what do you like to promote? For me personally, I like to promote thought leadership discussions around problems in the industry. So for me, I feel that we failed in a lot of ways, that pushing product is a direct sale process, and it's not. Working with influencers is an education process. How do we educate my audience or my viewer on the problems that you're addressing in the industry and allow them to organically make that decision on what the best solution is? Because what happens is, if you immediately push a influencer to promote a specific product, rather than them giving their own, rather than allowing them to have their own thought leader and authentic voice, the audience can realize it's a product promotion versus a product education or a problem education. So for me, when I'm looking at working with companies, I'd rather say, what problem are you addressing in the industry, rather than what product are you trying to sell? And I think that's the way I approach it, at least in the manufacturing and automation space.
I love that.
Because I want to be viewed as a person who can create value beyond just a product sell. So that's kind of my summary of what I wanted to add with that question.
I think that's like super spot on. Sorry, and I won't talk any more on it, but I think that's like super
great.
Important and critical, literally.
Yes.
Like, what's that long-term impact that you're looking for? And yeah.
Yeah, very, very well said. Thank you, Jake. Lindsay, so how do you, and I'm sure this varies a bit, I mean, how do you evaluate the success of an influencer program? So what are some of the key metrics that you've used in the past to indicate whether something was successful?
Yeah, and I think that even kind of building on what Jake is saying, like, and what Anthony said at the beginning, like, when you have your goals set at the beginning and you're kind of trying to figure out like what your objective is and what you're really trying to achieve with an influencer marketing play, like, is it education? Is it making people more aware of availability of a certain product? Maybe you're not trying to sell it, but you're just making people know that something exists, or that there's an event that's happening, or anything like that. I think that it can vary from influencer to influencer, or from program to brand, or whatever it is. But, we like to look at most of the time reach, more specifically even than like impressions. We like to know how many individual people might have seen a post, who is engaging with that post, that we can kind of calculate an engagement rate based on the engagements compared to the reach, like, ratio. That we like to look at sometimes downloads or purchases, visits to a location, the types of comments we get on posts. Like, if we're working with an influencer partner and they're getting really like not a lot of engagement, or the comments are all about something that's not related to the product that we're trying to promote. Like, if we have somebody that we're working with for Hudsonville ice cream, and all of the comments are about the shirt that somebody is wearing in the picture and not about the ice cream, like, that's kind of something that we look at for at least future reference.
Mm-hmm.
I think driving followers to your brand, if it's an Instagram campaign, getting people to come over and follow your brand from that influencer, all of those things are great. And, we've worked with even like real estate centers where they're like shopping centers, and we're trying to get influencers to come out and have a shopping experience or something like that. And so then it's like, what's the impact for the shopping center? Is it that people are following their local businesses? Is it that they're following like something that's happening? They're attending an event that an influencer promoted. So it really is like very specific to whatever the campaign is or whatever the objective is of your like influencer program. But we actually make it a requirement of most of the influencers that we work with that we capture at least some of their metrics. So I would say like high level, that reach and impressions and engagement number is super important. And again, it's something we ask everybody for, and it's part of our contract.
Yeah, and that was one of the questions that Megan submitted over here. She was asking, what she definitely answered perfectly there. She was asking, is it okay to ask for the back end, you know, once they fulfill their contract, their back end sort of data, which I think you sort of have to.
Yeah, and I think that you know, on the front end, when you're looking for people, the process for us, like we find people that we like, and then we reach out to them and ask them for their pricing. We ask them for a media kit, so it's very similar to traditional PR and like media relations, where maybe you're asking for a media kit for advertising space or anything like that. Same thing with influencers. So many of them have like a kit that shows what their audience size is, who they're reaching, like what their regions are that are important to them. If there's a specific audience, like age or other demographic information that they might like have in their community. And all of that stuff is great on the front end, but then looking specifically at how, if they're posting for you, how did that post perform? Did you get what you wanted out of it? And we've had instances where, you know, even influencer partners of ours that we've worked with for a long time, like they'll have a post and they have many successful posts, and then they have a post that doesn't perform so well. And they're like, this didn't perform the way I wanted it to. Like, I'm willing to post again because I really want you to get this like visibility for your product. So I think there's ways, like, as you establish those relationships, to work together, to use those metrics to your advantage. And I think that when you find the right partners and you have those kind of lasting relationships that you're revisiting time and time again, people are more willing to also like look at those metrics and say, this didn't really perform like I thought it would, or wow, this is the best post that I've had in a really long time, and I'm so glad that it was for you.
And one thing as well is communicate what you want those analytics and metrics to be up front, because a lot of times people will say, well, why don't we have these analytics? Well, my platform on LinkedIn does not display those analytics, does not display geographical reach, does not display age demographics like other platforms do, where if I go into YouTube can display like where people are viewing from and the age groups and like how long did they watch and all that stuff. LinkedIn and other platforms don't necessarily have all those analytics. So be very clear of what your expectations are when you're working with an influencer, so then that influencer then can communicate what is actually available to be reached. And then also, like, sometimes collecting that data and information is a lot of work for that influencer. So after you've already finished the proposal and he's waiting for the payment, and then you're saying, well, we need this now, there could be a lot of, you know, hesitation and, you know, basically conflict that can go on to say, well, hey, you wanted me to make this post, but now you want me to pull all this additional information that wasn't part of the original scope.
Very, very good insight. Thank you so much.
Those agreements, man.
Yeah, be specific, right? So Jake, so as a content creator, as an influencer, what would you say are the best types of requests? I mean, are there any types of requests that you tend to shy away from?
Yeah, I kind of hinted this a little bit earlier in the conversation. I shy away from just like product promotion of, hey, we're product A, don't buy product B.
Yeah.
You know, and I've hit those requests multiple times, like in the manufacturing space, if it's a certain robotic or PLC manufacturer, and they say, hey, we want you to promote this, and we want you to say that we have more reach than this robot. And I'm like, it's not about you comparing it to them. For me, it's all about what are you offering the industry? Because my first passion is advocating for an industry which I'm passionate about, and that's how I became an influencer in the first place. You know, if you want to just simply push your product, go buy ad space. You know, so I think that's the big thing for me is making those decisions. The other part as well is, does it match the type of content that I produce? If I'm a person who only makes videos and I post those videos on a social media platform, and then you're saying, well, we want you to make photo posts, or we want you to write an article, you know, understand that that is not native to what they're doing, and that's not native to their audience. So expectations of, you need to understand as a company what type of content that person produces, and then it's your responsibility as a company to develop a scope of work and a storytelling to that, to communicate to that influencer how you want them to share it. You know, a person like Kim Kardashian can go on and say, buy makeup, whatever, or, you know, or anything. I don't follow Kim Kardashian, so I don't know what her sponsors look like, but understand that her content and that how you're going to have her promote it is differently than another person who's going to make just videos all the time, or who does vlogging, or makes short stories, or who does animated graphics and comic versions. You know, there's so many different ways. So understand, how are you going to integrate your value or your product into their type of content?
And
Yeah.
we're,
Oh,
go ahead, Antonice. No, please.
Oh, I just wanted to add, I would really look at it. I mean, we're, as from PR professionals, when we pitch to media, we still have to know, like, okay, we're not going to pitch an entertainment story to a technology reporter unless technology is incorporated in it. But it's really doing that research and understanding who it is that you're trying to work with. So just to kind of tie what Jake said, like, we do this already as PR practitioners. So we can't, and we hear this from all of our journalist friends, like, don't send me something that I don't write about, you know, so don't pitch to an influencer that isn't even connected with what your brand is about or what you're trying to have them talk about to their audience. So I just wanted to throw that tidbit in, that we do this already, so it won't be as hard, or it's a real transferable skill when working with our influencer friends too.
Absolutely.
And one of the things that I would add, and I don't know if Jake experiences this, but I know, like, for influencers we work with, I think the other thing, we've talked a little bit about budget and how that plays such a big factor into, like, how you're you know, how you're even, like, structuring an influencer program if you're doing one. And I think that, like, there's this maybe, like, misconception that influencers are willing to just do things, like, in exchange for product, or in exchange for something that's, like, you know, oh, like, we're going to send you a box of ice cream and you'll be able to post about it, right? And that's not really the way that this industry works. Like, maybe it did years ago, but I think that now, like, part of respecting what somebody's, you know, track is that they focus on, whether it's you know, written content or video or photos or whatever, is also respecting that they should get paid for their work too. And making sure that, like, as you know, from the brand side, like, that you're approaching people with a budget and that you're willing to maybe negotiate that, like, knowing that people are, they're going to create content for you, but they're not going to do it for free. That's just not, I think that that's, like, a misconception that needs to be cleared out, that, like, maybe there are people who will do things out of the goodness of their hearts or something, but they have a job to do in a lot of cases. And, you know, you're going to get better results if you have someone who is seeing that you're looking out for them and their best interests as much as you are looking out for the brand or company that it is you're working for.
I'd like to get into some of these questions here. We've had a handful of them come in, some really good questions. This is an interesting one. When one-offing influencers versus an influencer provider, what are the best ways to work with several at a time? Are they willing to work together, or have everyone in the same meeting, or set up an initial program and monitor progress? Or do you have to work with each influencer independently? I guess that'd probably be case by case, I would think, right?
Yeah, I mean, for us, so, you know, I mentioned we work with, like, real estate centers and other things like that, but our biggest client that has an influencer program is Hudsonville Ice Cream. And we basically approach all of those on a one-to-one basis. We have people who are all across the country in different areas throughout the Midwest, the East Coast, and Texas. Like, people are everywhere. They're all different. They're all different personalities. They have different focus areas. They have different audiences. Yeah, at the end of the day, we want them to talk about ice cream, but we want them to talk about their own experience with it, and not something that comes from, like, a canned, like, message, whatever. So, I mean, we do provide them some messaging to guide whatever it is that they're saying, so that we do get some of those right message points in there. But we also want them to come up with creative concepts. We want them to come up with something that's so unique to them. So I think it would be really hard for us in that instance to approach something as, like, a group kind of project, because everyone is so different. And even the conversations we have with these people are so different, where we're, like, fostering different relationships. We have some people who are brand new, some people we've worked with for years. So it would be really hard, I think, to make it more of a, like, group, or, like, everybody hears everything all at once type of situation.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Unless it's, like, already a group, they're already a group or a part of the same organization. It probably does make the most sense to really talk to them in a one-on-one type of situation, because they're targeting different audiences all for this one big purpose. So I just agree with that for sure.
I will state though, it's not a bad question to ask and saying, are there other influencers you like to collaborate with? Because for me, in the manufacturing space, the idea of individual influencers is something that's extremely new. I mean, marketing and manufacturing is 10 years more behind other consumer-based marketing campaigns that a lot of other people have. That's just the idea of manufacturing. We're the oldest generation of workforce. There's not a lot of millennials and Gen Zs in the industry yet. So we're behind. So right now in the manufacturing and automation space, there's maybe a couple handfuls of influencers. And a lot of times companies say, hey, Jake, you're one of those influencers. Who else do you like to collaborate with? Who else do you like to work with? Is there someone else that would be fun to have as a part of this campaign? And that's just for me personally. And that's just because the manufacturing community is a lot smaller than other large segments out there in the consumer market. But it doesn't hurt to ask and saying, are there other influencers out there that you enjoy collaborating? Or are there other influencers out there that you would want to collaborate with? Because the one thing that you as a company might be able to create value for is connecting other collaborators and influencers that wouldn't have done otherwise. And that's a value as a company that you can bring to them. You know, if a company were to say, hey, Jake, we like what you're doing, but what if you collaborated with Mike Rowe with Dirty Jobs or something like that? That would be cool because he's a guy who's in my industry that I don't currently have the reach, but if they have that reach, there's opportunity.
Definitely great insight there. Thanks, Jake. Question here from Katie Fisher, one of our attendees. How do you handle a situation where the influencer is no longer working out for the brand? Any takers?
I mean, I think that what we like to do, and I will say this just based on like years of experience. We have, like I said, we have some people we've worked with for a couple of years. We know them, we know what kind of content they post because we get in that like kind of groove with them. So we understand, we know what to expect. I would say instead of locking in like a long-term partnership with someone who's brand new to you that you don't really know them. Like they're kind of a wild card. Maybe you see their content, but you don't really know who they are as a person. Approach those a little bit more cautiously. Like it's a one-off thing to start, and then you can start building a longer-term relationship from there. I think it's probably also smart if you have a longer-term partnership where it doesn't just cover one moment in time, but it's covering, a year or 6 months or multiple weeks or whatever it is time period that you're looking at. Just like you would with any other like contract or agreement, you could put some sort of like 30-day out clause type of language in there that would release you or the influencer from that agreement if things were not working out. Again, we talk a lot about things with influencers on more of a one-on-one, like here's a campaign we're doing, then maybe 6 months later we'll do something. So, we kind of don't get into that space of like having long-term relationships with people who might be in that like wild card space. But I think that like building that into your contract would probably be the best way to protect yourself, especially if it's a longer term deal.
Definitely. Thanks, Lindsay. We've had a couple questions on this, so I'd like to jump into talking a little bit about budget. So one question just came in, said, can you talk about budget? Where do programs start? I started doing influencer marketing on a small scale, and almost every time the influencer says, tell me your budget, I have no idea. Can there be a combo of comped product plus a per diem? I represent destinations, so there's already a big product deliverable, like comped lodging, free meals, and attractions.
Yeah. So I think that when you have the like comped product, like all of the things that you could offer, like if you're sending somebody on a trip or you're having them go to a destination and have an experience, maybe like map out what the value of that is so they can see it. Like if it's a high value item and you're saying, we're going to give you a stay in a hotel, we're going to, comp you for some of your travel, we're going to pay for your meals, we're going to do all these things, like that gets really pricey. That gets to be a really like good deal and a good value. So you can have that as like, this is the value of this campaign. We may be able to support some like additional spending money or something, but like most influencers, I think when it's a high value item, they don't necessarily need to be paid. So when we're talking about budget, like that's where like it's not necessarily like a dollar, like you're cutting them a check, but you're giving them something that's of high value that they might not get elsewhere. And I think that one of the things that we like to use when we're looking for influencers, instead of reaching out to somebody and saying, I absolutely have a campaign that I want you to work on, like, can you be part of this campaign? We approach it a little bit more lightly, where we're saying, we like your profile. We think you'd be a fit for this brand. Can you send us your pricing information and like your media kit and information about you so we can see if you are a fit for a campaign? Because then you're kind of getting that pricing, even if it's a range or something. A lot of influencers have like rate sheets too. So you can get a little bit better sense of their pricing before you even have to make an agreement with them of like, oh, we want you to work with us for sure. What's your budget? Like, then you kind of can set like, okay, our budget is whatever it is. And there's a little bit of room to maybe negotiate, but you kind of know what their expectations are for payment before you even approach them to actually be part of a campaign. So approach it like, I'm building a list. I'm, trying to look for people who might be a fit. And then you have that information for a future use.
Definitely, thank you. Another question came in here. So how do you determine how many influencers you need? I guess that probably might vary, but I understand the reach and impressions and adjust based on results, but you have to set a budget against other tactics. So you have to have a general idea. Is there a rule of thumb? I guess it probably would just really be specific to the campaign, right? I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I think it would definitely just be specific to what your goals are. Like, what are you trying to get out of this campaign for sure, in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with that. Like it's just so dependent on whatever your goal is. Like if you're having an event and you want more people to come out and you're working with like hyper local influencers and you're saying like, we want you to share this. Like it just is so dependent on each individual campaign. It's hard to say that there's like one specifically right answer. But I think what the key is in a lot of this is finding what the right answer is for you, for your company, for your brand, for whoever you're representing. Figure out what that is, because like determining success in this type of work, in this type of like influencer marketing, it can vary so much from like industry to company to individual, whatever that is. So figure out what your goal is and what you're trying to achieve. And that's how you measure success, not compared to anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Can you talk about some of your, and I think, you might have touched on some of this with Hudsonville there, Lindsay, but can you talk about some of your favorite, influencer partnerships to date and why? What I guess worked out really well and the why behind it?
So we've used influencers for a holiday that we created for Hudsonville a few years ago called Pint Day. So we had influencers all over the place who were promoting that Hudsonville had ice cream pints, that they had coupons for ice cream pints. So people get really excited about that type of thing. And we always see some really great content. I love some of the holiday campaigns that we've done where we have people talking about like holiday flavors. And one of the big things that we like to focus on with them is just like, again, I think I kind of mentioned this, but the experiences that people might have with ice cream or with the people that you're enjoying ice cream with. Because I think that's meaningful to a lot of people, like spending time with other people and having these like special moments. And so like using influencers to kind of show how ice cream is incorporated into their lives, because in a lot of cases it is like, that's a product where people are using it a lot of the time. You might not think about it as like a something that needs like a campaign. It's definitely not something that's like as like probably thoughtful as what Jake is doing on the manufacturing side, but like it's just a little part of like everybody's everyday life. And so I think like seeing some of the images that we've gotten and some of the like interesting just like ways that people like experience ice cream with their families is really fun to see, because everybody's so different and everybody like has a different take on that.
Absolutely. Are there any trends that you see or anticipate coming up this year? I don't know if you're seeing anything on your side, Jake or Lindsay, Antonice, any kind of trends, things coming down the pipeline?
I definitely see a lot of, and this honestly may be the big point of influencers anyway, but video is really, really big right now. I know everybody's platform is trying to capitalize since TikTok has been going crazy.
Now you've got Reels, and YouTube Shorts.
You got Reels on Facebook now. Like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think video strategy is going to be really big moving forward, like how you're telling your story in a quick, moment through video. And then also that authentic and organic, like what Jake was speaking to, making sure that the message that you're trying to put out there has the correct messenger, so that you can really have that impact and that great value that you're looking for. It's not just, oh, like I said earlier, just grabbing Kim Kardashian because she has millions of people and they probably will react to her. But is it authentic, and are those the people that you want coming to your ice cream shop, or in the manufacturing world, or buying your clothes or wearing it? Yep. So I think those are two big things that I've seen, really being very clear on that authentic, value there.
Great insight. Thank you, Antonice. Let's see here. Yeah, so here's one that I think it probably would depend on, again, your goals, but it says, where can you find the right industry-specific influencers, specifically some localized micro-influencers? So I guess you'd have to sort of see where your industry is at. I mean, you kind of touched on that earlier, right? And like, Jake, you got a highly niche audience, but you know where to find them.
Yeah. And I think that's the big thing too, right? There was a comment earlier that was made about, hey, each platform a lot of times has categories and niche segments within those platforms. And a lot of times those are actually communicated by hashtags. So if you're looking for where your industries are or where your micro content is, I honestly encourage you, look on social platforms and search by hashtags to find what those contents are. If I'm manufacturing, maybe it's hashtag manufacturing or hashtag automation. If it's makeup, maybe it's hashtag makeup. If it's ice cream, it's probably hashtag ice cream or hashtag food or hashtag dessert. There's all these different ones. So if you want to find where your audience is living, I think hashtags are a phenomenal place to start within those social media platforms. And then you can begin to find what influencers you can begin working with.
Yeah, and you can kind of go down a rabbit hole. Like if you search with a hashtag and then you find like some really great content, you might see that the person who used that tag is using a number of other tags that you could look at and follow. And I mean, I don't think that we talked about it, but like you can use like the follow hashtag feature on Instagram. So like if you have a brand account or if you're searching for influencers, I guess you could make like a Finsta or something and like make it like your searching account, where you're like, following certain hashtags so you can kind of keep a pulse on whatever like industry it is that you're trying to keep tabs on. And that would be a good way to just like get those in your feed or get those kind of in front of your face more often.
Yeah. And I would even just add, like, if you want to localize it, like you were saying, makeup and ice cream, like just put Detroit on it too, like Detroit ice cream or ice cream Detroit or Detroit makeup artist. Or like when I'm trying to go get my hair done, I put in like, well, I have a great hairstylist anyway, in case she sees this. But if you're looking for someone like that, you can literally localize it sometimes by just adding the location that you're looking to, also in that hashtag. So I found some success in that too.
There's an interesting question that came in. So Jake, when it comes to you being an influencer, the content that you create, do you have sort of a percentage that you do that is sponsored content versus things that you just simply want to share? And do you have sort of like a framework for that, or how do you delineate?
Yeah, great question. For me personally, I like to keep sponsored content less than 10-15% of my posts. I think is healthy. I think if you do more than that, it's just you're turning into an ad platform. Right. And I think you lose your authentic reach. Now, one thing I will say is if there is something I'm passionate about sharing or I think is really cool, I'll be active in reaching out to that company as an influencer saying, hey, what collaboration options are there? But the one reason for that is, as well as my space, like I said, in the manufacturing space is so new to industry influencing and content creation on a personal level. A lot of times it's, wait, you're a person who talks about products in manufacturing? What is that? And, it's like, and so a lot of manufacturers have no idea. Like a lot of manufacturers don't even have a social media page. So it's one of those things it's a two-way street, but I do my best to try and keep my partnered content under under 10 to 15%. And the reason why I say partnered content over sponsored content is if they're sponsoring me, I view that as that's not really something that I'm passionate about, versus as they're partnering with me, it's something I'm actually advocating and pushing along. And I know it's just a terminology, but like I never say sponsored, I'll say partnered, because for me, I'm only teaming up with them if I believe they're actually something that represents what I am trying to advocate in the industry. Great question, though.
Thanks, Jake. We talked, so we did touch on budget. There's sort of an interesting one here, though, I think we could talk a little bit more about. So just like traditional PR and marketing, I assume there's a lot of value to having consistent social media strategy. How does a company that doesn't have a budget for an ongoing campaign make the most of a small budget?
I mean, I would say that like if there are like influencer partners that you're looking to work with and you don't have a large budget, one way to approach it with them might be like bundling some things together, because some people might offer you like a little bit of a discount to do something like that. I think that like it goes back to the conversations that we've kind of had threaded through this whole chat today, where like figure out what works for you. And I think that like you have to make sure it's the right thing. So like influencer marketing is great. It is, you know, something that it's really like, I think the number for 2021 was that it was like a $13 billion industry or something insane like that, where it's, you know, being used by a lot of different companies and a lot of different people. That doesn't mean that it's right for everyone. And it doesn't mean that you have to do it just because you like feel like you need to. But if you want to, like, figure out those touch points where it's going to be the most impactful. Like, what is the one moment in time that you could really benefit from having a couple of influencers share something? It doesn't have to be ongoing throughout the year. Maybe it's an event, maybe it's like a special reveal of something. Any of those things, like it might just be that one moment in time that's the most beneficial to put your effort into, rather than trying to make it span like 6 months or a year.
Yeah, and I would add, kind of collaborate with your, and depending on how big your company is and everything, collaborating with your PR department as well. Like try to, where you're not just only relying on this influencer, if this is a part of your big goal to really kind of have a huge push and reach. I think working with your PR team to also elevate whatever campaign or initiative that you're doing, you can also add that whatever that one influencer that you're trying to get this big bang for your buck into this press release as well. And now you're kind of helping to amplify whatever this big, you know, project or campaign is. So if the budget is the issue, I would also kind of collaborate with your communications department on kind of like additional layers of amplification that both supports the influencer, because maybe they get some additional publicity as well. And you really get a good bang for your buck without having to spend so much money on just the influencer. So.
And I think if it's like a nonprofit, or if it's like a cause that is close to someone's heart, like they may be more willing to partner with you to, you know, execute a campaign or be part of something that's a longer stretch of deliverables that doesn't cost as much, because that it's like a meaningful cause to them. So that's something to consider too. Like you know, obviously that question is kind of dependent on what it is that you're trying to promote. But if you are, I would, you know, in a lot of cases, like nonprofits might not have a budget to do something with influencers, but there are probably other ways to approach people. Like, hey, we know that this means a lot to you. Like maybe there was a family member that had like you know, they went through a fight with cancer or something like that. Like, then there might be somebody who's willing to, you know, be a participant actively as an influencer in something like that, that, you know, the cause and the end like message is more meaningful to them to share.
Yeah, and even from a nonprofit standpoint, your funders can also be supportive in like securing some influencers, or at least the budget behind it as well. So like, you know, for instance, with us, we do a lot of work with like the Detroit Pistons and everything. So in theory, we kind of have influencers that will help support things, but it's because that partnership is there, which kind of helps with being the nonprofit, because there's always that give back component. But really being very strategic in how you use all of these elements. But that may be also an opportunity. Tap into your funders. If you happen to be a nonprofit, what are those businesses and organizations, and who do they know? And how can that kind of be, you know, supportive in this bigger goal and strategy?
So as someone said in here, totally good point. Ice cream, like who doesn't love ice cream? That's definitely a fun one to be working with, right? So, I mean, how do you, Lindsay, and then Jake and Antonice, please chime in too if you got any comments on it, but how do you motivate yourself to work with a client that is more challenging to get influencers excited about? Maybe something that's a little bit less universal.
Yeah, I mean, I think that for us, like anytime we've used influencers, like I've mentioned ice cream, I mentioned like shopping centers where we were giving people like retail experiences. We worked with a med spa for a while where we were giving people treatments that they could choose from. We also work with cannabis clients who have used influencers. So I would say like all of the areas that we're using influencers are really fun for the people who are ending up doing the influencing because they get something great out of it that they like. And they're sharing it with their audience. So I mean, I think that I'm not really sure if I have like a thought on like a client where an influencer might be like a challenge for clients to get excited about, because I think that like you just kind of have to, it goes back to like what we've been saying about PR and like traditional like media relations and things like that. Like, what would you do to get somebody excited about a story that you wanted to tell? What's like the hook that you're going to put into your pitch? I think those are the types of things that apply almost exactly to an influencer partnership. Like, what's the thing that's going to get somebody interested? And it's our job as PR practitioners to really tell the right story and to get somebody interested in it. Like, yeah, maybe it's not as exciting as ice cream, because I think ice cream is the most exciting thing personally, but there's always going to be an audience for something out there. Everybody's so different. There are so many different influencers. There's going to be a person or a group of people who are excited about whatever it is that you're trying to promote. You just have to find them.
Yeah, I mean, to add on to that, right? Everything's not going to be ice cream, but I think one thing that you need to understand as a company is what is your impact? What is your do good in a lot of areas? Because influencers in a lot of areas right now, especially millennials and Gen Z's influencers, are about change, about opportunity, about their passion. And if you can take what your product is and talk about what is the purpose behind it, what is the do good scenario that your company is doing, that might be another way to excite influencers beyond just, hey, we're going to send you to Orlando. We want you to talk about the newest thing that's set up, or we're going to send you ice cream and we want you to talk about ice cream. There's a lot of other stuff out there I recognize that are not necessarily the fun, exciting products and stuff. So your next question is, if your product's not necessarily the most engaging thing, what is your do good strategy behind that product? Or what is the do good strategy that your company is promoting beyond just the solution that you're offering? That's something that I look at as well, because a lot of times there's a story beyond just the brand.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jake. So we got just a couple minutes left here. We're almost at time, but got a really interesting question here I'd love to hear your thoughts on. So it says, you touched on the point of hashtag utilization. Some influencers have said that the amount of hashtags matter when posting, especially on Instagram. They've gone on to say that if you put too many hashtags, that it may even hurt your outreach. Is there a general rule of thumb for the amount of hashtags? Are you changing your hashtag strategy as Instagram is changing its algorithms, or do you stay the same throughout the terms of the influencer marketing? Maybe it's a little bit more of a social media niche thing, but I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, I'll chime in, but for us, like, I think that when it comes to hashtags, like, I mean, I think searching hashtags and using hashtags can be seen as two different things. When we're using hashtags for influencers, like, we're not really dictating which hashtags they have. Like, we might give them one or two that we would really like them to use. Like, if we're working with Hudsonville ice cream, one of the hashtags we always want our influencers to use is Hudsonville ice cream, but we don't really dictate like what other hashtags they have to use. So it's kind of on the influencer to determine what's the right mix for them. But I do think that there's a good point about like changing strategy as these social platforms change their algorithms, because that's really like something that we should be doing all the time if we're in that social media space, is like, what's going to be the most impactful thing. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, I think that like every brand is probably a little bit different. I think that there's a value in using hashtags to a certain extent, but like, yeah, using too many is probably like going to turn some people off. But I do think that there's a mix where some people are starting to put them in the comments instead of putting them on the post. So they're not as visible. I mean, I guess like I would just say like be on the for those changing algorithm pieces, but like I don't think asking influencers to use 25 or 30 hashtags is necessarily valuable. I think figure out like which ones you want influencers to use, and then like say these are the most important to us that you include. If you want to include others, it's up to them to determine if that's going to be successful for their post or not.
And I think Instagram only lets you have up to 30 hashtags anyway now. So at least I feel like I saw that pop up one day because I was just being hashtag happy. And they were like, oh, you you can't do more than 30. So I definitely hop in if that's like the wrong number. But I think they're kind of starting to limit how many hashtags you use as well. Maybe that might be kind of the reason why. But I agree, like finding those most impactful, the most important hashtags that connect to your campaign or your goal or what your success looks like is going to make the most sense anyway.
Yeah, and with hashtags, you need to understand the importance of what the value hashtag brings. If you want to create a bunch of your own hashtags that have no followers, there's no point to what your hashtag brand is.
Right.
The other thing that's important is understanding and I guess you could say, what is the current trend, what is currently going viral, and what is currently going meta. And those are termed out, you know, for younger generations, like, oh, that's meta right now. It means there's another meaning beyond just the word or beyond just the definition that's happening. So understanding what those hashtags are is important, but understanding the followers as well. If you want to do your own company hashtag, that's great that you can define and target the audience back to. But if you want to do a bunch of like random hashtags that has absolutely no following, you're losing the point of what a hashtag is. Your point is under the analytics of the social media platforms that are designing what recommended posts go to what future viewers. That's how you go viral. You need to understand what hashtags are being used. So for me, going back to just my experience that I can speak on, manufacturing and engineering are the two most used hashtags in my industry. So I want to include those as the most used hashtags. But if you want to use a hashtag that only has 100 followers, what's you're going to ask yourself, what is the reasoning for the hashtag? Is that a hashtag that you want to develop? Is that a hashtag that's being used through a variety of different creators? So if a person clicks on that hashtag, they see that content being used. And it's also, how are you developing your own hashtag? If you want to use a hashtag that your brand wants to start building something off of, see what other content is being used for that hashtag before you start promoting that. And that's your own responsibility, and that's your own research. I'm not going to see that certain stuff on here, but like what a company decided to use as a hashtag I saw, it was a post I saw on Reddit, was also another hashtag that was being used, and we'll just say a not safe for work environment, but was being pushed on a corporate account. So understand, do your research on what those hashtags are, but then use hashtags that the influencer is comfortable with, use hashtags that are being heavily followed in the industry, and then define what your hashtags you want to be to begin building your own brand off of that is being supported by the influencer.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Jake. And so I think we are at time now. We're a couple minutes over. This was a great conversation. You guys all provided some really great insights. So thank you so much to our panelists here. If anybody wants to stick around for a few, we can do the networking. Just stay in the attendee list there, and I'll move you over, promote you to panelist, and can do a little bit of chatting. So thank you all so much again. Really, really great conversation today. I'm gonna go ahead and stop recording.